We've only just raised the curtain on this year's Springwatch, and already we've proved that Britain's got a lot of wildlife talent.
Flying fish, frolicking foxes, some magnificent mayfly, and tonight we bring you jostling jays.
Gillian and I will be exploring an old World War II airbase.
On a heated mission to uncover some of its more secretive inhabitants.
So welcome,
it's Springwatch.
Hello and welcome to Springwatch 2017, coming to you from the glorious Sherborne Park estate here in Gloucestershire. Just look at it, look at that. I've done an unintentional twirl. What a fool, what a fool to start the programme.
It was very Strictly Come
It's
Dancing.
run by the National Trust, it's a fantastic place. And the reason that we've come here to this patch of typical countryside and not a nature reserve is that our mission is a little bit different this year. You see, typically we've gravitated to those nature reserves where everyone is working 24 hours a day to farm wildlife. But this is a working landscape. I'm looking over here at sheep, I'm looking at pasture. This is made up of farmland. And what we've come to do here is explore how the wildlife lives alongside these farm animals and the farming practices and how sometimes it struggles to do that. That's our mission. But the wildlife mission at this time of year is mainly to reproduce. So there are broods and litters of animals all over this landscape struggling to survive and to stay alive. And they've got all sorts of threats, plenty of predators out there after them, of course, but there is one universal threat to all of that wildlife, and sometimes to us too. It's the weather. And last night, it was the rain. Oh, where did the blue skies go? And why is it raining so? It's so cold I can't sleep tonight. Everyone's saying everything's all right. Still I can't close my eyes. I'm seeing a tunnel at the end of the lights. Sunny days, where have you gone? I get the strangest feeling you belong. Why does it always rain on me? Is it because I lied when I was 17? Why does it always rain on me?
I can't believe it. You've started the show with a twirl and a song. You're going on musical theatre on us. What is happening here? No, that was very lovely, Chris, very lovely. You saw at the end there those jays. They were absolutely bedraggled. And last night after the show, it was torrential rain. But for those jays, being wet isn't their only problem. This is a nest that we introduced you to yesterday. It's a first for us to have jays. They're in this spruce tree. You can see our camera there, and the camera's on the nest, and if you take a look at the nest, it's ludicrously precarious. It's like the Leaning Tower of Jay nest. It's at a ridiculous angle.
It's ridiculous.
And at the end of the show last night, on Twitter, there was a bit of a vote. Will they fledge or will they fall? Well, by the end of the evening, 84% of you reckoned they would fledge, 16% said they would fall. It's nice to have an optimistic audience.
A very optimistic audience, actually, given the slope on the nest and the amount of rain.
Well, let's see if either of you were right. This is what happened at 5:23 this morning. You can see just at the bottom of your screen there is one of the chicks. It's out of the nest. And I can tell you now that it didn't fledge, it fell. So 16% of you were right there. It's flapping its wings, it's trying to get back up, and it's just falling through the foliage. So the question, I guess, that's on everyone's lips is, did it survive? Well, let's have a look. Did it survive? I'm pleased to tell you, it did. It survived today. There it is. It's looking a little bit sorry for itself. And those feathers, to me, don't look like they're feathers that are ready to fly, although I do think it's partly because it got so wet. So there it is, it's having a good stretch. It starts to call, and the adult bird comes in and starts to feed it. But obviously that chick is very vulnerable at this stage. You can see it's flapping its wings, but it's not managing to take off. So that was definitely a fall. What about the others? Did they fledge? Did they fall? Are they still there? There's one way to find out, to take a look at the live nest. And if we look at it live, you can see that it is empty. There were 4 chicks in there, and now there's nothing at all. What do you reckon? Fledge or fall? Well, this is what happened just a few hours ago, and you can judge for yourself. Yep, they fledged. The last 3 definitely fledged, and you can see that the way it's branching there, it's sort of semi-fledging, flapping its wings and successfully flying a little bit of the way. So we've got all of those 4 jay chicks out of the nest now, and obviously we're going to be keeping a close eye on them. They're all quite vulnerable at this stage. But it's fantastic that they fledged. But it is a little bit of a shame, Chris, because it's the first time we've ever had a jay nest on Springwatch. And by day 2, they've all gone.
I know, but we are going to try and keep an eye on them because we want to see whether that youngster that's closer to the ground survives. And there are plenty of threats out there. Lots of buzzards here. And buzzards will very often go to corvid nest and take the young out. So when they're making all of that noise just out of the nest, it does make them vulnerable, but we're going to keep an eye on it. Those jays are nesting just down here in this block of woodland that runs along there. Mixed deciduous, there's some plantation in it as well, but it's a nice little block of woodland, and we've got quite a few of our nests down there. And when it comes to terrestrial habitats in the UK, woodland is the most important. It supports more life than any other. But Michaela, how much woodland do you think we've got in the UK?
I don't know, isn't it about 13% of our land mass?
Land surface 13% actually adds up to 3.16 million hectares, which sounds like a lot of woodland. But I've got to tell you, it's the 2nd lowest in Europe. Only Ireland and the Netherlands has less woodland than the UK. The good news is, however, that since the end of the Second World War, we've doubled the amount of it. But clearly, if we want to improve things for our wildlife, we've got to keep planting. In the Cotswolds, we've got about 20,000 hectares of woodland, so it's quite well wooded actually as a region. Here you can see the woodland in winter and transforming into spring as it blooms there with all of those leaves. All of those leaves are, of course, highly edible. Lots of things are eating them, and then the things are eating the things that eat them. And one species that does precisely that is the blue tit. And they're nesting in that woods down there as well, in a nest box. Let's go to it now. Here's the exterior of that box, and you can hear the youngsters calling. But there they are, inside there. And there were 9 of them in that box. I think they might have just had a feed. They're all quite active and vocal there. If you've been watching those on our red button or the webcam, you'll notice that of the 9, 2 of them are slightly smaller than the others. A couple of runts in the brood there. But is that because the adults have not been feeding them enough? Let's have a look, because they seem to have been pretty busy over the last few days. We've been doing food counts. Here they are, slightly younger. Lots of caterpillars going in. Those are the things that are eating the leaves. Blue tits are eating the things that are eating the leaves. And then somewhere's a sparrowhawk that might get that blue tit, but that's another story. We've calculated they need 900 caterpillars a day, a brood of 9 blue tits, and at the moment they're getting about 450 something. That might be because of the rain over the last few days. Rain washes these caterpillars off of the trees and makes them inaccessible to the tits. Robins and blackbirds beneath have a bonanza, but the tits are struggling. So there's a lot of hard work for those tits to be doing down there, actually, at this point. And we'll be keeping an eye on them, of course. Fingers crossed for those 2 little ones. I mean, they can get a brood of all 9 out. I'm sure some of you have seen that in your gardens, but if the weather stays fair, there might be some chance of that.
Now, Chris, you pointed out that that nest is down there, which is the same area as the jay nest is. And as we know from last year, if you remember last year's Springwatch, we had a blue tit nest box that had great tit chicks in it. And this is what happened. Just as they were thinking of fledging, they poke their nose out, a jay comes and snatches the chick out of the hole. And that jay came back and it actually took 3 of the chicks, leaving just 1. Pleased to say the final one did fledge and survive. And as a result, I seem to remember we called it Gloria Gaynor.
No, you.
I called it Gloria Gaynor, as in I will survive. Well, that was last year. What about this year? Because that nest box, as I say, is near the jays. Are the jays going to be a problem? Well, not at the moment, but there is another bird that could be, and it's this one. The great spotted woodpecker. Look at it, it's almost listening in the hole. It can hear them all tweeting away, and it has a jolly good look. Now, that was on Sunday. We've seen the woodpecker twice near the hole, so It happens though, doesn't it? I mean, it often happens.
They do. It's happened one year in my garden. I had a couple of wooden boxes out, both with broods of great tits in. Saturday morning, woken up by the tapping. Half an hour later, no great tits. Sunday morning, the next nest box. Once they learn where they are, they're likely to come back to them. And as those chicks become more and more vocal and they start climbing up to the nest hole, that's when they've really got to watch out. But of course, we'll be keeping an eye on that. Another iconic bird of our woodlands lives north of the border in Scotland. It's a huge member of the grouse family, and I think we can rate it as one of the most boisterous and bolshy birds in the UK. Clearly a brave man was needed to confront it. We found one, Mr. Yolo Williams.
With its stunning mountains and beautiful glens, it's no wonder that tens of thousands of people visit the Highlands every year. And for the bird watchers that come up here, well, the bird they want to see more than any other, it's not the golden eagle, it's not even the white-tailed eagle. It's a woodland bird that sadly has been in decline now for 4 decades. It's the capercaillie. In the 1970s, population estimates of these striking birds stood at around 20,000. But today, they've dropped to only 1,000 or 2,000, making the capercaillie a red-listed bird and extremely difficult to find. Those that are left are closely monitored to see how they're faring. And today I'm joining Gareth Marshall from the RSPB, who carries out yearly studies on a vital population in one of their Scottish strongholds. Why is Speyside so good for capercaillie?
Well, I think there's just an abundance of Scots pine woodlands. They feed on the needles throughout most of the year, but in particular during the winter. But it also provides the right light conditions and the ground conditions to get lots of blaeberry growing in the ground. Blaeberry is a real key plant for capercaillie. They feed on the berries, the buds, and the chicks feed on the insects that live in blaeberry.
And these are big birds, aren't they? Kind of like a woodland turkey.
Yeah, they're massive. So a male capercaillie is about 4 kilograms with a wingspan of about 1.2 meters, typically.
That's a big old bird, isn't it? You wouldn't want to bump into one of those on a dark night. And when those birds come together, it's an even more impressive sight. Every spring, the males gather on a lek, traditional sites where they display to each other and attempt to win over a hen. In order to try to establish a hierarchy, the males make clicking, gulping and popping noises. But if that doesn't work, it can result in real violence. Where is the lek in here?
So it's just over there, actually. But there's nothing about that area that is really specific. You wouldn't go there during the daytime and think, oh, this is a lek, because it looks a lot like the rest of the forest. And we only know that it is one through a lot of hard work of field workers going out and looking for signs of capercaillie. And by that, I mean droppings, essentially, looking at capercaillie droppings. So here, you've got the 2 big male droppings at the front and 2 female droppings at the back, and you can see the difference. The male droppings are much bigger, thicker, chunkier from a much bigger bird, and skinnier. Still pretty big, but significantly skinnier for a female.
So we know the capercaillie are around, and in order to check on their numbers, our best chance of seeing them is to be here at first light. So the hides go up and we make ourselves comfortable for the night. Now it's just after 5 a.m. and I woke up this morning to a series of clicks and pops followed by wheezing noises all around me. It's unique. There's no other bird that has a call anything like this. They're quite spread out. Most of them are behind me, at least 2, maybe 3 behind me. There's 1, maybe 2 amongst the trees in front of me. What a weird alien noise this is. Very, very odd thing to wake up to. Amazing them. What do you think?
Well, display was a little bit subdued. The males were all quite spread out. And so I reckon a minimum conservative of 6, count of 6 males.
I know it's early days yet, but does it look as if the Strathspey population is holding its own this year?
Yeah, the numbers of males we're recording at Lex is remaining relatively stable.
Tower. It's a 13726/41 control tower for those who are interested. Anyway, this used to be called, still is, RAF Windrush. And if we get some old photographs, we can see what this place looked like actually during
bunny huggers out there, but also bunny birds.
It can run along the wall and it can make dens in the wall. And they make multiple dens in their territory. So lucky to see a stoat like this, because normally you see a fleeting glimpse. You can't say whether it's a stoat or a weasel, but we can clearly see that that is a stoat because of the black tip on its tail, which is lacking in a weasel.
Although you'd think there must be far less risky twigs to be found elsewhere. And she was big enough to have this satellite tag fitted to her. And this is a
Absolutely picture perfect.
Last thing in the evening.
Bought the plots. Properly as a ...80 years.
It's absolutely fantastic. Brooding them. She might have just nipped off. Both parents have been attending them quite regularly. No activity there. We'll come back to it live if she comes back or if the male comes in. In the meantime, let's have a look at what they've been up to, because these birds are really quite special. Here is the male on the left with that very characteristic pink breast, and he's regurgitating a soup of seeds that turns into bushes and trees and woodlands. And also, many airports aren't sprayed with herbicides, so there's lots of tasty herbs there for them to eat. They're not being farmed, after all. They're only being cut. Once I spent a whole and a very delightful day on Belfast Airport looking for Irish hares, and I saw them too. It was a real treat. I think that's prominent crest they've got there, which they use when they're displaying to one another, but it's erected it here whilst it's having a bath. Striking bird, striking.
I mean,